and get into it. Okay. So, reasons for cybersecurity incidents. Cybersecurity incidents can be classified into two broad areas: weak account types and poor access controls. So, weak account types. Strong authentication should be required on all user accounts. User accounts should be routinely reviewed for security, and if necessary, some accounts may need to be deleted or strengthened. Now, that if necessary, you really should have an offboarding process or jobs or something like that that runs when someone quits, so that you can have those accounts taken off as part of that part there. Any of the following accounts should be prohibited: shared accounts, generic accounts, and guest accounts. I have an example of this. So when I very first started, I'm not going to say where because I don't want to get them in trouble, the techs all used the exact same account. And this is like 7 or 8 techs, and they all used the same account. So there was no accountability, meaning that if there could have been a whole lot of finger pointing. So if someone decided to do something really bad, which when you have that many access rights, it's possible, no one would have surefire proof of who actually did it. So eventually that was taken away. There was a lot of screaming by some people when it was taken away, and they were made to use, personalized accounts like you're supposed to. But in the end, they got over it. And my suggestion when I talked to other people was, yeah, you really need to do this, because if you do a back audit on any of these, there's no way to prove who did what. And we have way too much power. And I hate to say that because I really want to be the person that's like, yeah, I know what's going to do that. But the insider threats are called insider threats for a reason. And I have seen techs get really angry and pull some terrible things. So don't ever use generic accounts, especially for IT personnel. Poor access controls. Access control is granting or denying approval to use specific resources. Physical access control consists of fencing, hardware door locks, and man traps to limit contact with devices. Technical access control consists of technology restrictions that limit users on computers from accessing data. There are standard access control models that are used to help enforce access control. Access control concepts. There's identification. This is the process of recognizing and distinguishing the user from any other user. So a delivery driver presenting an employee badge. Authentication is performed by checking credentials. That's where you examine the driver's badge. Authorization is granting permission to take action. And that, for example, in this would be allowing the driver to pick up the package. Access is the right given to access specific resources. Accounting is a record that is preserved of who accessed the network, what resources they accessed, and when they disconnected from the network. Without accounting, you have no audit records, you have no way to prove who did what. It can be a real mess. Other reasons for cybersecurity incidents. Other terminology describes how computer systems impose technical access control. Object is a specific resource, example, file or hardware device. Subject is a user or process functioning on behalf of a user, computer user. Operation is the action taken by subject over an object, example, deleting a file. Okay, so here's your technical access control roles and terminology. Access control schemes. Access control schemes are standards that provide a predefined framework for hardware and software developers. Use the appropriate schemes to configure the necessary level of control as part of privileged access management. There are 5 major access control schemes: discretionary access control, mandatory access control, role-based access control, rule-based access control, and attribute-based access control. Discretionary access control scheme is the least restrictive. Every object has an owner who has total control over their objects. Owners can give permissions to other subjects over their objects. This scheme is used on major operating systems. DAC has two significant weaknesses. It poses a risk in that it relies on decision by the end user to set the proper level of security. And we all know, usually if you give the end user the option to do something they don't like to. A subject's permissions will be inherited by any programs that are subject executed, that the subject executes. Sorry, I just had a cat try to shred my leg, so I lost my train of thought. Mandatory access control is the most restrictive access control model. The user has no freedom to set any controls or distribute access to other subjects. There are two key elements to MAC: labels. Every entity is an object and is assigned a classification label that represents the relative importance of the object. Levels, a hierarchy based on the labels, is used. MAC grants permission by matching object labels with subject labels. The labels indicate level of privilege. Microsoft Windows uses a MAC implementation called Mandatory Integrity Control. RBAC, or role-based access control, is sometimes called non-discretionary access control. The only time I've heard that used is usually in like military or federal type stuff. Access permissions are what?
They use the non-discretionary access control. I think they use both of them actually in the G metrics.
Do they? Well, RBAC, in the industry, I don't hear it as much, but you know, be prepared, you might hear it. Access permissions are based on user job functions. RBAC assigns permissions to particular roles in an organization. Users are then assigned to those roles. Cat. Objects are set to be certain type to which subjects with that particular role have access. Rule-based access control, also called role-based role-based access control, dynamically assigns roles to subjects based on a set of rules defined by a custodian. Each resource object contains access properties based on the rules. When a user attempts access, the system checks the object's rules to determine access permission, often used for managing user access to one or more systems. Business changes may trigger application of the rules specifying access changes. ABAC, or attribute-based access control, uses flexible policies, which are more flexible than rule-based. It can combine attributes. Policies can take advantage of attributes such as object attributes, subject attributes, and environment attributes. ABAC rules can be formatted using the if-then-else structure, which if you've ever done any programming, that should be familiar. ACLs are access control lists. It is a set of permissions attached to an object. An ACL specifies which subjects may access the object and what operations they can perform. When a subject requests to perform an operation on an object, the system checks the ACL for an approved entry. ACLs are usually viewed in relation to operating system files. ACLs provide file system permissions for protecting files managed by the operating system. ACLs also have been ported to SQL and relational database systems so that the ACLs can provide database security. The following are limitations of ACLs. Using an ACL is not efficient. ACLs can be difficult to manage in an enterprise setting where many users need to have different levels of access to many different resources. Adding, deleting, and changing ACLs on individual files can be time-consuming and open to errors. So if you just imagine how many files the average person has, and then times that by however many tons and tons of people you have in an environment, and then think about having your typical IT staff have to manage that. That'll give you an idea. Preparing for an incident. Creating an incident response plan. So one thing that I did when I took over was I created a template, which seemed to really help. Incident response plan is a set of written instructions for reacting to security incidents. An incident response process includes 6 action steps to be taken when an incident occurs: preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. At a minimum, an IRP should contain the following: documented incident definitions, incident response teams, reporting requirements / escalation, retention policy, stakeholder management, and your communication plan. So this is an example. This is like just an example of things that you can use for preparing for that. So the exercise name that you can do a tabletop walkthrough or simulation, and then each step there will show you what it would be like. And I'm not going to run through all that because that will take a while. Studying attack frameworks. Exploitation frameworks serve as models of thinking and actions of today's threat actors. 3 common attack frameworks include the following: the MITRE attack, the Diamond model of intrusion analysis, and cyber kill chain. There are others, but those are just the most common. Knowledge check. In which type of access control can access policies be based on the properties of objects, subjects, and the environment, and can be constructed using if, then, else statements? It was that if, then, else statement that nailed you guys. All the rest of it was on A, but it's that if, then, else statement part. Okay. Incident response. Steps that should be taken when responding to an incident include taking advantage of SOAR runbooks and playbooks, performing containment, and making configuration changes. Every time you respond to an incident, you will see how you can update your response. Using SOAR runbooks and playbooks, security orchestration, automation, and response are what they're talking about. They can help security teams manage and respond to security warnings and alarms. A SOAR allows a security team to automate incident response. A playbook is a linear style checklist of required steps and actions needed to successfully respond to specific incident types and threats. A runbook is a series of automated conditional steps that are part of an incident response procedure. A playbook focuses more on manual steps to be performed, and a runbook is usually actions that are performed automatically. Most SOAR platforms have pre-configured out-of-the-box playbooks that are based on industry best practices and recognized standards. It's funny how many sports analogies are used in this, so yeah, that is a good catch. Perform containment. Containment is limiting, and by that, pay attention, limiting the spread of the attack. Sometimes you cannot initially contain everything, so the best thing that you can do is to limit as quickly as possible. Containment can be most effective when the network has been properly designed, but if it's not properly designed, you still have to contain an incident. A secure network design takes advantage of network segmentation based upon principle of zero trust. Network segments can be created based on business units, locations, and the level of sensitivity of the network data. Network segmentation only restricts attackers by limiting access to other parts of the network. When an attack occurs, isolation is then used to segregate both the attacker and the infected systems from reaching other devices. Having been in incidents where we've had to do this, it makes a big difference if you use network segmentation versus look, the entire network is now infected. It is a absolute pain, and it gives you just heart palpitations thinking about, okay, what if this had gotten to our whole network, versus, hey, we can just shut down this one segment and contain it, and it'll have limited access. Making configuration changes to neutralize an attacker, limit the spread of the attack, and prevent additional successful incidents. It may be necessary to make configuration changes to devices and processes. Configuration changes may need to be applied to the following: firewall rules, content/URL filters, digital certificates, data loss prevention settings, mobile device management settings. The top two were the most common that we had to change, just because there are lots of things in flux, and it's really easy to go, oh, no one's going to be able to do that. Oh, no, they can. But those are things that you can move around as you need to. Knowledge check 2. What must be incorporated into network design to restrict attackers by limiting access to other parts of the network? Data loss prevention, content filters, a runbook, network segmentation. I just harped on it, so I think you guys should know. Good job. Ta-da! Yes, network. That it's running, yeah. Very funny. Incident investigation. A cybersecurity incident should be fully investigated. Now, the reason I emphasize that is that there are some times when you're in IT that they just want to go and try to sweep it under the rug. And that does not help you learn and patch for future incidents. So I highly suggest that you, even if it is difficult, that you make sure that you fully investigate all incidents. So the reasons to investigate are you need to pinpoint how it occurred so that future incidents can be prevented, and for regulatory compliance and reporting. You may not be required at the time to submit some sort of report. That does not mean that something won't come back and bite you later on, and you will have to do it. Incident investigations involve analyzing data sources and performing a digital forensics investigation. Next semester, you get digital forensics, so you'll get some of that. Data sources, log files. Using data from log files involves identifying log file sources, collecting data, and analyzing data. Security logs can reveal the type of attack that was directed at the network and how it successfully circumvented existing security defenses. Network-based device logs provide a beneficial security data for an investigation. System log files, that's authentication servers in particular, should be investigated. Application log files can give information about attacks focused on different applications. Vulnerabilities in voice and video communication are often compromised to allow attackers to pivot to other resources. And even if you have, I'll give you an example, even if you have an attack where they got in but weren't able to get back out, doing a full examination so that you can figure out how to do stuff really helps. So for example, we had one that my former colleague and I found. He was database manager. I was IT security analyst. We started seeing some weird traffic, and we started looking at stuff, and I had him start looking at stuff on his side, and we pinpointed the machine. I was able to yank the drive, and then I ran autopsy on it, which is digital forensics, which we'll get to use in your class, by the way. And when I was looking through it, I was like, man, there's all this stuff in here. And I started finding all of the things, and it turned out that there was a vulnerability with, it was the Java plugins of Firefox that were not being updated by the users, because that was one that wasn't being pushed out, and that was how they got in. And if we hadn't found that, I mean, we had kind of been on the fence on certain people using Firefox after that, and we'd shut it completely down and we're like, nope, sorry, sucks to be you. But if we hadn't found that, we wouldn't have realized how they'd gotten in. Luckily, we found it before they got back out with the data, but you still have to go out and find stuff in order to see how things go. Okay, problems associated with log management are due to the following: multiple devices generating logs, very large volume of data. So in that particular incident, it took almost a week for it to parse out some of the really small files. So I got parts of it and was like, I think this is what happened with XYZ, but because if you have a ton of things, sometimes it takes a while. And different log formats. Solutions to these problems are here. So, syslog. This is a system logging protocol. It's a standard to send system log or event messages to a server. NXlog is a multi-platform log management tool and supports various platforms, log sources, and formats. RSY log. So basically rsyslog. Rocket Fast System for Log Processing is an open source utility for forwarding log messages in an IP network on Unix devices. syslog-ng is open source utility for Unix devices that include content filtering, and journalctl is a Linux utility for querying and displaying log files. Other data sources. Data can be accumulated from other sources, including IP monitors, metadata. You can get a ton of stuff from metadata, analyzers, and vulnerability scanners. I suggest that you look at all the tools that you have available and use as many as possible. Digital forensics. Okay. So, like I've said, forensics is kind of a big thing for me. So, digital forensics. What is forensics? Forensic science is the application of science to legal questions. Forensics can be applied to technology. Digital forensics uses technology to search for computer evidence of a cyber crime. Digital evidence can be retrieved from computers, mobile devices, cell phones, digital cameras, and virtually any device that has processor, memory, or storage. And the industry just continues to grow. Because if it has a way for it to be abused, somebody's going to find a way to do it. So then you're going to need to have someone out there, like I'm part of this group that does digital forensics, but you have to be either a professor or in law enforcement or an attorney or, in that type of an area. But we frequently, as we share things back and forth, I see all sorts of stuff on how do I do XYZ to new form of technology. So, I mean, it's a really great field if you want to learn how to do new stuff with lots of new technology. Yeah, Bones is not exactly the best forensics. Yeah, no, let's just say no on that one.
What are you talking about? It's perfect forensics.
No.
We demand our supercomputers.
Although supercomputers would be nice. And was it that graphic interface that they used? Yeah, that would be nice to be able to do all that stuff.
Holograms. Yep.
Yeah, that would be awesome. What's funny? NCIS had some decent stuff on the forensics, not the computer portions of it, though. There were some parts that were okay and some parts that weren't. So you have to pick and choose on those shows. Forensic procedures. When responding to an incident, there are 5 basic steps to follow. Secure the crime scene. That is a big one. Preserve the evidence, establish chain of custody, examine the evidence, enable recovery. Secure the scene. Individuals in the immediate vicinity should perform damage control. Contact the incident response team, secure physical security features, quarantine electronic equipment. By that, they mean don't touch it. There are so many times that I've seen cases that were just flushed down the toilet because they're like, we're just going to unplug this and take it with us. And they just destroyed everything. The whole point of digital forensics is you want to leave it at the state in which it was when you found it, because it's volatile. And if there's things stored in volatile memory, there are all sorts of ways to trigger erasure of data. It is just insane how easy. Yeah, exactly. We're just gonna, yeet this out into the car and everything will be fine. No, stop. Yeah, it makes my eyelid twitch whenever I see people do stuff like that. And I'm like, no, bad cop, no. So quarantine the electronic equipment and have an actual professional come and do it. If necessary, report the incident to the appropriate external authorities. After the response team arrives, the first job is to secure the crime scene, which includes physical surroundings should be documented, photographs should be taken before anything is touched, computer cables should be labeled. The team takes custody of the entire computer along with the peripherals. That is another problem. People hide things in peripherals. It might look like a normal scanner. It might look like a normal data cable, like I showed you with those OMG cables. They may not be normal. Take everything. The team interviews witnesses. Preserve the evidence. Preservation of evidence involves ensuring that important proof is not destroyed. Digital evidence is very fragile. Evidence should be placed in bags that have tags or identifying labels. And with digital forensics, you can't just use regular bags because you have to deal with static electricity discharge. So there's all sorts of things you have to do. So bags should be sealed to protect evidence from being altered. Tamper-encoded seal is a seal or tape that cannot be removed or reapplied without leaving obvious visual evidence. Tamper-resistant seal is designed to deter tampering with the bag. If necessary, judicial system may need to be involved to ensure the integrity of the evidence is maintained and can hold up in the court of law. I will tell you right now that there are some things that look tamper-proof that are not. So really know your storage and what's coming and all sorts of things. Make sure you understand what you're using. You can use, when you use a regular plastic bag, make sure that it's not on something that's going to be damaged by it. They have special products for digital forensics. They have what's called evidence tape, which is very fragile, and most people, you just see them slap it across crosswise and then they leave the whole thing open. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to seal all the way across anything that can be tampered with, and then you're supposed to initial and date. And you're supposed to initial and date with a Sharpie, not a pen, because it's just easier to read. So there's all sorts of rules. And yes, I do know about this because I used to teach classes in it. And in just regular forensics too. I taught the cops how to make sure everything was done correctly so it actually made it through court. Document chain of custody. If I got called into court, it was 100% every time because of chain of custody. Documenting evidence from the very beginning is called provenance. Chain of custody documents that the evidence was maintained under strict control at all times, and no unauthorized person was given opportunity to corrupt the evidence. A chain of custody includes documenting all serial numbers of the system involved, who handled and had custody of the systems and for what length of time, how the computer was shipped, if you shipped it, and any other steps in the process. It has to be, for example, you fill out your whole top part with all of your information, and then you write from, like if the officer gave it to you, they write their name, and then to you, the date, the time, and then you write from you to the storage locker, because you put it in the storage locker, then from the storage locker to whoever. It is very, very, very detailed. And if there are any breaks in that, and it can be proven that there are breaks, even if you have no proof that someone actually got in there and corrupted the evidence, if there are breaks, that chain of custody is broken and that evidence gets thrown out of court. So chain of custody is very, very important. So this is what a basic chain of custody tracking form looks like. So on the top, you have your case number, your offense, your person who submitted it, your date and time and seizure, description. A lot of the times you'll see like extra pages added. The chain of custody, that is really short for an actual chain of custody. A lot of the times you'll see the disposal authority is not even on the same page. The chain of custody can be pages long, depending on what you're doing. And that property record number on the top, usually they'll have like a whole box across the top, and that is just one of those like forensic lab or whoever it is that's where they put their information. In fact, hold on 1 second. Let me see if the state police still has theirs. They used to have their forensic forms online, so I can at least show you what their the evidence forms look like. Oh, there you go. You can see an evidence. Okay, so this is not one of their forms, but this is what their generic evidence envelopes look like. So that giant, this is for lab use only up there. And then they put, you know, where you're supposed to send your stuff. Then they have your instructions. And then you can see here, you have your agency submitting, agency case numbers, suspect, victim. If you have a victim, sometimes you won't have a suspect or you won't have a victim. Charge, if you have a court date, description of evidence, location found. If there was any sort of an examination that you know is going to be required, like for example, fingerprint examination, DNA kits, UAs, which I absolutely hated processing. That's a urinary analysis kit, blood, vitreous humor, things like that. Officer, that's the person who's in there. And then you see down here is just the top, from to date, that's your chain of custody. And sometimes these get really long and they have to end up slapping more labels on your envelope. So that's an example of an official one of those. Now, let me sorry, it's not. Give me 1 second here. It's got all my stuff hidden so below all of the presentations. Okay, there we go. A lot of the times they don't, they instead of including by county, because they take like from city agencies, they will just have the agency. And because each laboratory had different like specialities, like some of them did, all of them did blood because that was like the most common, like blood alcohol was the most common. So every lab did that. There were 3 major labs, the one region in Boise / Meridian, the one here in Pocatello, and then the one in Coeur d'Alene. And like the one in Meridian, because it had the biggest facilities, they did all the DNA. So they did all of that for the state. So that's why we didn't have, breakdowns of each county. We did know which counties for what things we had to do, but we got stuff from all over the state. Like firearms processing could be done at certain things. We didn't do those when I was there. Fingerprints had to go through. You had basically a chart of what went where. So if we got something that was sent to us from the wrong agency, we basically just would have to go, yes, we looked at this. We made sure the seals were okay. I got this from whoever gave it to us, and we sent it back to the right agency. So that's usually what happened.
I had something like that a little bit. We had I was in between jobs, and the one of my NCOs in the Guard was the state's. She basically processed all the UAs for the National Guard for the state, and she's like, "Hey, I've got from what she'd just gotten the job. It was a full-time position. She's like, from what they're telling me, there's a backlog that hasn't been sent out, and I know you're in between jobs. You want to get some get some full active duty pay time in." And I was like, sure. And come to find out, like, I show up the next day, we go in and we open it up, and there's 8 months of old urine in this sealed room, and it was the worst thing. Well, second worst thing I've ever smelled.
I think that would probably be second worst. The worst thing I had was we had a DNA freezer that died, and we had, I won't tell you what, but DK smells really terrible. I'll just tell you that, and it was awful. So there are just some really horrible things. Yeah, exactly. There's some things that just smell really bad, and you have to learn how to put your mind somewhere else or put mentholatum under your nose and go into into battle. I had to learn very quickly that there were some things that I had to just not care about, but it's an easy to burn out in job. I worked for 7 years with them, and after that much time, I was like, you know what? I think I need to go somewhere else. So I don't understand how some of the cops can be 20, 30 years. I mean, good on you if you can do it, but I just seeing the evidence from some of the stuff that they had to deal with, I was like, yep, not for me. Okay, onward. Examination of evidence. An order of volatility must be followed when examining evidence in order to preserve the most fragile data first. After a computer forensics expert creates a mirror image of a system, the original system is secured and the mirror image is examined to real evidence. Now, that is something that you're going to hear repeatedly when you're talking about digital forensics. Never, ever, ever do work on a live system. When you're doing this, you want to copy whatever it is. And then, because that way you have to have that so that, if you've ever watched court shows, they're like, we want to have our own independent person take a look at the evidence. Well, you can't really allow that to happen if you've already messed up their evidence. So you have to take a copy of that and work on the copy. You can get what's called a forensically sound copy, and there are different ways to do that, but you can't take the actual evidence and use that to examine, because if you mess up, you're done. It's done. It's dead, Jim. So you have to take a copy of it. They call it, like, there's FDK, forensic disk imaging, all sorts of special things that you do to take that. So your mirror image backup programs rely upon hashing algorithms as part of your validation process. Two elements frequently overlooked during investigation include the swap file or page file and firmware. Hidden clues also can be exposed in examining RAM slack, drive slack, and remember what I said about metadata? Metadata. Enable recovery. A final analysis looks at recovering the data from the security event and the lessons that can be learned from it. Strategic intelligence is the collection, processing, analysis, and dissemination of intelligence for forming policy changes. Strategic counterintelligence involves gaining information about the attacker's intelligence collection capabilities. Forensic tools. Software forensic tools include the following. A utility named DD, sometimes called DNU, DD, is an imaging utility that requires only minimal resources to run and generates raw image files that can be read by many other programs. memdump is a Linux utility that dumps your system memory. WinHex and Autopsy. Autopsy, remember me talking about that one, is a really cool program. There are a ton more forensic tools, by the way. Hardware forensic tools include the following: digital forensic workstation and mobile device forensic tools. Now, because mobile forensics is so, well, it's relatively new, and there are some very particular things that you can get. They have like little kits and little things that you can take and work on the devices while you're out in the field. They have field kits. Now they do have pre-built digital forensic workstations. If you want to give yourself a heart attack, go out and look at how much they are. But if you want to build yourself one, that's what I did for my previous job. Basically, it is a high-end computer, like a gaming computer that has a lot of drive bays, and then there are special hard drive hot swapping things in memory. There's like, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but basically what it does is you slide your hard drive in, you push a button on it, and it locks your capability of accidentally overwriting the stuff and gives you the capability of creating a forensic copy. But basically what I did was just create an upscale gaming computer with a lot of hard drive bays in it so that I could use those tools. But if you have someone that's willing to foot the money for a forensics workstation, good on you, because some of those are $15,000 and up. Cloud forensics. When dealing with a cloud incident, the following should be considered. The right to audit clause in a cloud contract gives the customer the legal right to review the logs. When a cloud customer is notified by a cloud provider that an incident occurred, the immediate response will be to ask for details about the scope of the impact. The cloud provider may take weeks or months to provide this. That's the problem with cloud computing forensics. The legal/regulatory jurisdiction laws that govern the site in which the cloud data resides may present difficulties. Also, wherever the servers are located or wherever the company is based, if they're not based in the United States, or if they're not based in a country that has a friendly relationship with the United States, it is incredibly difficult to get things back and forth. When you're dealing with countries like Australia or New Zealand, the UK, the European Union, they're a lot easier than getting things out of China, Russia, places like that.
There's nowhere that doesn't have a friendly relationship with us. We're fucking loved.
We're awesome. No, yeah, we're mega. We're great. Yeah, no, it's just ridiculous. Yeah, you really, really have to know the international laws when you do digital forensics. Okay, digital check 3. When discussing the chain of custody of evidence in a cybercrime, what does provenance mean? Preservation of the evidence to ensure it's not destroyed, ensuring that collected evidence is admissible, documenting custody of the evidence from the beginning of the investigation, securing the scene of the crime until response team arrives. We say I pretty much harped on this one, so I think I gave you guys. Yep. Okay. All right, that's the end of it for this one. Like that. See, I guess. Go with the majority. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for today.